Keanu Reeves arrived on a cold, drizzly evening in the quiet town of Clearview as the neon lights of a lonely gas station flickered against the wet pavement. The roads shimmered under the dim glow, reflecting the movement of hurried passers-by, some hunched under umbrellas, others pulling their jackets tightly around them to ward off the chill. Brighton gas station stood on the outskirts of town, a seemingly unremarkable place with only a few pumps, a small convenience store, and an old flickering sign that hummed faintly in the damp night air. However, on this particular evening, something extraordinary was about to unfold. And it all began with the unexpected arrival of one of Hollywood's most beloved actors, Keanu Reeves. The sleek black motorcycle cut through the quiet of the night, its tires rolling smoothly over the damp concrete before coming to a stop at pump number 3. The rider removed his helmet, shaking out slightly damp black hair as he scanned the station with quiet curiosity. Though dressed simply in a dark leather jacket and jeans, there was no mistaking who he was. Keanu Reeves, a global icon, standing in the most unassuming of places. As he glanced around, his sharp eyes landed on a young woman working tirelessly under the fluorescent glow of the convenience store. Taylor, 7 months pregnant, moved carefully but efficiently, her simple uniform stretched over her growing belly. She wore an old jacket, too thin for the cold, and her tired brown eyes revealed the sheer weight of exhaustion she carried, not just from pregnancy, but from the burdens of life. Nearby, on a plastic chair just outside the store, sat a little girl, her tiny hands gripping a nearly worn-out red pencil. Luna, Taylor's 7-year-old daughter, was lost in concentration, sketching something in an old, tattered notebook. Occasionally, she would glance up at her mother, her small face filled with quiet admiration and worry. Keanu took in the scene, something in his chest tightening as he watched the mother and daughter. The way Taylor forced a smile even through her fatigue, the way Luna remained quiet yet observant. It all struck him with an inexplicable sense of compassion. After refueling his bike, Keanu found himself walking toward the little girl, crouching slightly to see her drawing. "Hey there," he said gently, "what are you drawing?" Luna looked up, startled by the stranger's presence. Though something about him seemed familiar, she couldn't quite place it. She hesitated before clutching her sketchbook tighter. "I like to draw places I want to go," she admitted shyly. Keanu tilted his head, intrigued. "And where is this place?" She pointed to the unfinished sketch on her lap. "It's a kitchen. I haven't decided what to name it yet." Before Luna could explain further, Taylor hurried over, wiping her hands on her apron. "Luna, don't bother the gentleman," she said, her tone carrying the weariness of a mother trying to do everything at once. But Keanu only smiled. She's not bothering me at all. It's nice to see someone draw their dreams." Taylor nodded politely, but there was an underlying nervousness in her demeanor. She didn't have time to chat. A car honked at another pump, and she rushed away to assist, leaving Keanu and Luna alone for a moment. He turned back to the little girl, watching as she hugged her sketchbook close. "You're really good at drawing," he complimented. Luna gave a small, hesitant smile. "Mama says it's how I show the world what I think about." Keanu studied her for a moment. "And what do you think about?" She pondered his question, then answered, "Lots of things. Like what Mama's next recipe will be, or places we could go if we had enough money. And sometimes I draw things just to make Mama smile." Keanu felt a pang in his chest at her words. It was clear how much Luna adored her mother, how deeply she understood the struggles Taylor endured, even at such a young age. As Taylor continued working, Keanu noticed her struggling to lift a heavy box of windshield fluid. She paused midway, one hand instinctively going to her lower back as exhaustion visibly took its toll. The drizzle had soaked through her thin jacket, and her movements were slower, wearier. Keanu made a quiet decision in that moment. When Taylor finally took a brief pause, bracing herself against the counter for support, he approached, gently. "You okay?" he asked. "You look exhausted." Taylor straightened instantly as if masking her pain. "I'm fine, just a long night," she said with a forced smile. "Bills don't wait, and my daughter needs me." Keanu nodded, respect clear in his eyes. You work here every night? 2 nights a week at the gas station, mornings cleaning offices. It's enough to keep a roof over our heads, she said, her voice steady despite the evident strain. His gaze flickered toward Luna, who was watching them from a distance, her sketchbook momentarily forgotten. When do you rest? He asked softly. Taylor hesitated, then let out a quiet chuckle. I don't. That's just not an option for me. Keanu didn't press further, but the weight of her words stayed with him. As another wave of customers arrived, Taylor had to rush off again, leaving Luna by herself. Keanu took a seat on the small bench a short distance away, ensuring she was never out of sight. After a moment, Luna glanced up. Are you really Keanu Reeves? She finally asked, her voice small but curious. He chuckled. That depends. Do you like my movies? She nodded, her eyes widening. Mama watched one on the old TV when I was supposed to be asleep. It had a bus in it. Keanu grinned. That's a good one. Luna glanced at her mother, who was now scrubbing a windshield with tired determination. Mama never stops working, she said softly. She used to cook a lot. She made the best lasagna, but now we don't have the ingredients. Keanu's mind whirled. He had seen struggling families before, but something about Taylor and Luna's quiet resilience struck a chord deep within him. He knew what it was like to struggle. He knew what it was like to fight through life with nothing but determination. And in that moment, he knew exactly what he needed to do. But before he left that night, he knelt down beside Luna, his voice filled with quiet promise. Take care of your mom, okay? And don't stop drawing. Luna nodded. Will you come back? Keanu smiled. I will. The next morning, just as Taylor was finishing her overnight shift, the sound of a familiar motorcycle echoed through the gas station once again. She glanced over, half expecting she might have imagined his promise to return. But there he was. Keanu walked toward her, carrying 2 large paper bags. He set them carefully on the counter, unfolding the tops to reveal an array of groceries, including everything needed to make lasagna. And at the very top, a brand new set of colored pencils. Luna gasped, Are those for me? Keanu nodded. I figured you might need a fresh set. Her face lit up with pure joy, hugging the pencils as if they were treasure. But Taylor's eyes remained on the bags, conflicted. This is too much, she murmured. We can't accept. Keanu raised a gentle hand. It's not charity, just a little help. I've needed help before too, and I believe in paying it forward. He then pulled an envelope from his jacket and placed it on top of the groceries. This is just to help you get through this month's rent. Taylor's breath hitched. Keanu, And this, he continued, holding up a small flyers for a free culinary course. I pulled some strings. They're waiving the fees for you. For the first time in a long time, Taylor was speechless. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Keanu simply smiled. You don't have to decide now. Just keep your heart open. Sometimes, one opportunity is all it takes. Little did Taylor know, this was only the beginning. Keanu watched as Taylor's fingers hesitantly traced the edge of the envelope resting atop the groceries. Her lips parted as if she wanted to protest, to refuse out of pride or principle, but no words came. Instead, her tired brown eyes darted toward Luna, who was already flipping open her sketchbook, testing out one of the new colored pencils with quiet delight. Taylor inhaled deeply, steadying herself against the overwhelming feeling of gratitude and disbelief. I don't know how to thank you, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu's smile remained warm yet humble. You don't have to, just promise me you'll consider it. You don't have to take the culinary course if it doesn't feel right, but at least give yourself the chance to try. Taylor swallowed hard. A chance. It had been a long time since she had been given one. Life had forced her into survival mode for so long that the idea of anything beyond immediate necessities felt almost foreign. Dreams, ambitions, anything outside of working to keep a roof over their heads. It all seemed like a luxury she couldn't afford. But now, standing before her was a man who had no reason to help, yet had done so anyway, expecting nothing in return. Luna, seemingly sensing her mother's hesitation, reached for Taylor's hand and squeezed it. Mama, she said softly, you always tell me to try new things. Taylor's breath hitched at her daughter's innocent words. Keanu gave her space, stepping back slightly. Take your time, think about it. His gaze softened as he glanced at Luna. And if you ever need someone to taste test your lasagna, I volunteer. Luna giggled, and Taylor, despite the turmoil inside her, found herself smiling. Keanu checked his watch, then nodded toward them both. I should get going, but I meant what I said. I'll be back. With that, he strode toward his motorcycle, the sound of his boots against the pavement muffled by the early morning stillness. As the engine roared to life, Taylor and Luna stood in silent awe, watching him disappear into the distance. For the first time in a long while, Taylor felt something stir in her chest. Hope. Taylor sat at the tiny kitchen table in their apartment later that morning, staring at the flyer Keanu had given her. Luna had already fallen asleep on the couch, her new pencils clutched tightly in her small hands, sketches scattered around her like a colorful blanket. The room smelled of instant noodles, her go-to meal when money was tight. She had eaten quickly, barely tasting the food, her mind too preoccupied with what had happened. Was she really considering this? She traced the words on the flyer: culinary course for aspiring chefs, full scholarship available for single parents. Her fingers tightened around the paper. Could she even do this? She wasn't some ambitious young woman anymore, dreaming of opening her own eatery. That version of herself had disappeared a long time ago, buried under the weight of responsibility, abandoned by someone who had promised to stand by her side. Yet, hadn't she still clung to the remnants of that dream, even if only in small ways? The way she found comfort in cooking for Luna, in recreating the dishes from her childhood, in seeing the way food brought even the briefest moments of happiness into their otherwise difficult days. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. The next morning, before she could talk herself out of it, Taylor called the number on the flyer. The first few days of the course were overwhelming. The kitchen was far larger than anything she had ever worked in. Stainless steel counters stretched across the room, ovens lined one wall, and the scent of fresh herbs and sizzling butter filled the air. Taylor felt out of place at first, surrounded by students younger and more confident than her, but slowly she found her rhythm. With each passing day, she learned new skills, rediscovered old ones, and felt a part of herself awaken again. Luna, meanwhile, would sit in the corner of the classroom with her sketchbook, watching her mother work. She would doodle tiny restaurant concepts, menus, and ideas, her excitement contagious. One afternoon, Keanu showed up unannounced, standing quietly near the doorway as he watched Taylor move effortlessly between stations, perfecting her dish for the day. When she finally noticed him, her cheeks flushed. "What are you doing here?" she asked, wiping flour from her hands. Keanu smirked, checking in on my investment. She laughed, an easy, genuine laugh that she hadn't let herself indulge in for far too long. The instructor, a seasoned chef with years of experience, stepped forward, nodding toward Taylor's dish. "She's a natural," he remarked to Keanu. "You should taste her sauce. It's restaurant quote." Keanu took a spoonful, savoring the blend of spices and herbs, his brows lifted in approval. "That's incredible." Taylor, flustered by the praise, simply shrugged. "I had a good teacher," she admitted. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She was finding herself again. Months later, Taylor stood in the middle of an empty space, one that would soon become something more. The small storefront wasn't much to look at yet, but in her mind, she could already see it. The warm lighting, the cozy seating, the smell of fresh bread and simmering sauces. Keanu had done the impossible. He had helped her secure a lease for the space, connected her with people who believed in her, and given her a foundation to start something real. But the rest, that was on her. And she was ready. The day the sign went up, her hands trembled as she secured it above the entrance. Casa DeLuna, named after the little girl who had been her guiding light through every hardship. Luna beamed as she looked up at it, her tiny hand gripping her mother's. "Mama," she whispered, "you did it." Tears pricked at Taylor's eyes as she hugged her daughter tightly. "We did it," she corrected. And when she turned, she found Keanu standing nearby, watching with a quiet, knowing smile. "Proud of you," he said simply. Taylor exhaled, a mix of relief and excitement flooding through her. "Couldn't have done it without you." He shook his head. "You did the hard part. I just gave you the push." As the doors to Casa DeLuna opened for the first time, a new chapter in their lives began. A story of resilience, kindness, and the power of a single act of compassion. Taylor quickly learned that opening a restaurant was only the beginning of the journey. Running it, keeping it alive, and ensuring it thrived required a different level of dedication. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of excitement and exhaustion. The warm scent of simmering sauces and fresh bread filled the small space, drawing in customers eager to try something new. Word spread quickly throughout Clearview about the single mother who had transformed a struggling life into a thriving kitchen. The community, once indifferent, became her strongest supporters. Strangers who had barely glanced her way at the gas station now came in regularly, eager to taste the dishes crafted with care. Some left generous tips. Others brought their friends, and a few simply stopped by to tell her how inspired they were by her journey. Despite the success, Taylor remained grounded. Each night after the last customer left, she would sit at one of the tables, exhaustion settling into her bones, but a satisfied smile on her lips. Luna would sketch at the counter, already dreaming up new ideas for how to decorate their little eatery. The baby, now a few months old, would sleep peacefully in the corner, wrapped in the warmth of the restaurant that had become their second home. Keanu visited when he could, never making a big deal about his presence. He would slip in quietly, take a seat at a corner table, and simply observe. He never wanted recognition or attention, just the quiet joy of seeing someone flourish from a single act of kindness. One evening, Taylor placed a steaming plate of food in front of him before taking a seat across from him. "I think I finally understand," she said softly. Keanu lifted a brow. "Understand what?" "Why you helped me," she admitted, stirring the tea in front of her absent-mindedly. "It's not about saving someone. It's about giving them the space to save themselves." A small smile played on his lips. "Exactly." She glanced around the restaurant, taking in the laughter, the clinking of dishes, the warmth that filled every corner. "For so long I thought survival meant shutting out the world and doing everything on my own. But it turns out sometimes letting people in makes you stronger." Keanu nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "We all need someone to believe in us, even when we don't believe in ourselves." Taylor exhaled, setting her spoon down. "I just hope I can be that person for someone else one day." Keanu's expression shifted, something knowing in his eyes. "You already are." A few days later, an unexpected visitor walked into Casa DeLuna. She was young, no older than Taylor had been when she first found herself struggling to stay afloat. Her clothes were worn, her expression hesitant, as if unsure whether she was welcome in such a warm and lively place. Taylor noticed her instantly. She saw the way the young woman's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag, the way she hesitated just inside the doorway, as though debating whether she had made a mistake in stepping inside. Taylor wiped her hands on her apron and approached with a welcoming smile. "Can I get you a table?" The young woman's eyes flickered with something between relief and uncertainty. I actually came because I heard you might be hiring." Taylor studied her for a moment, recognizing the exhaustion in her eyes, the same kind of exhaustion she once carried. "Do you have any experience?" she asked gently. The young woman bit her lip. "Not really, but I learn fast, and I really need a job." Taylor didn't hesitate. "Can you start tomorrow?" The girl's eyes widened. "Really?" Taylor nodded. "Someone once gave me a chance when I needed it the most. It's only right that I do the same." The next morning, the young woman, who introduced herself as Ava, showed up right on time. She was nervous, but eager. Taylor took the time to teach her, to show her the small details that made a restaurant feel like home. Within a few weeks, Ava had become part of the family, her confidence growing with each shift. It wasn't just a job, it was a second chance. Keanu stopped by one evening, watching as Taylor guided Ava through a recipe with patience and encouragement. "You've built something incredible here," he said as she joined him at his table. Taylor glanced at the restaurant around her, at the laughter, the warmth, the people who had become more than just customers. They had become a community. It's funny, she mused. I spent so much time thinking I had lost everything. But in the end, I gained more than I ever could have imagined. Keanu smiled. That's the thing about life. Sometimes the hardest chapters lead to the best ones. As the night wound down, Taylor walked to the front of the restaurant and switched off the open sign, a soft satisfaction settling in her chest. Once, she had stood in the cold, wiping down gas pumps and wondering how she would make it to the next day. Now she stood here, in the place she had built with her own hands, surrounded by the people who had become her family. The road had been long, filled with obstacles she never thought she could overcome. But she had, and she knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. As Taylor locked up Casa DeLuna for the night, she leaned against the glass door, staring out at the quiet street. The town of Clearview had transformed in her eyes. Once just a backdrop to her struggles, now a place of new beginnings. The weight of survival had lifted from her shoulders, and for the first time in years, she was thinking beyond tomorrow. Luna sat on a nearby stool, her colored pencils scattered across the counter. Her sketches had become a fixture in the restaurant. One wall proudly displayed her evolving artwork, a testament to both her talent and the journey they had taken together. The baby, now growing quickly, slept peacefully in a makeshift crib in the back corner of the restaurant. Taylor smiled as she walked over to tuck the blanket around his tiny frame. Ava, their newest employee, finished wiping down the tables, humming softly to herself. She had settled in quickly, finding her own rhythm in the warmth of Casa DeLuna. Taylor saw so much of her younger self in the girl. Someone trying to outrun the weight of life, desperate for a chance. The way she had hesitated when she first walked through the doors reminded Taylor of her own reluctance to accept help from Keanu. And yet, here she was, paying it forward, just as he had hoped she would. Ava glanced up, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. You know, I never thought I'd find a place that felt like home again. Taylor tilted her head. Why do you say that? Ava hesitated, then shrugged. I guess I've just spent a lot of time moving, a lot of time trying to make things work. But here, I don't know, it feels different. Taylor leaned against the counter, watching her. You don't have to keep running. Ava looked down at the rag in her hands. I guess I don't. Taylor recognized that hesitation, the fear of believing that something good could last. She had carried it for years, herself. She wiped her hands on her apron. Ava, you're part of this now. You belong here as much as anyone else. Ava met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. And then, slowly, she nodded. At that moment, the bell above the door jingled. Taylor turned to see a familiar figure stepping inside. Keanu, his leather jacket damp from the night air, his dark hair slightly tousled. You're late, Taylor teased, walking toward him. Keanu smirked. Traffic. He took a seat at his usual table, and Taylor wasted no time bringing him a plate of food. It had become their ritual. He would show up unannounced, never asking for anything, just wanting to see how things were going, and every time, she would feed him, just as a quiet thank you for everything he had done. Keanu took a bite and sighed. You've outdone yourself again. Taylor smirked. I'd hope so. Can't have you thinking I peaked too soon. Luna skipped over, holding up her latest drawing. Look, it's a new sign for the restaurant. Keanu studied it carefully. It was a colorful sketch of Casa DeLuna, but this time, there were more tables, more customers. It wasn't just a small eatery anymore, it was something bigger. You're expanding? Keanu asked, raising a brow at Taylor. She shrugged. Not yet, but maybe someday. Keanu leaned back in his chair. I have a feeling someday isn't too far off. And he was right. A few months later, Casa DeLuna had become more than just a restaurant. It had turned into a place where people found comfort, where they felt seen. Customers didn't just come for the food, they came for the feeling of home. Taylor started hosting small community nights, free meals for those in need, cooking classes for single parents who wanted to learn how to make nourishing meals on a budget. and even art workshops for kids, where Luna proudly shared her colored pencils with anyone who wanted to create. One evening, as Taylor was locking up, she found an envelope tucked under the door. Her heart clenched, flashing back to the night Keanu had handed her an envelope that changed everything. But this time, the letter inside wasn't from him. It was from a woman who had been eating at the restaurant regularly, a mother of 3 who had been struggling but never wanted to ask for help. She had finally saved up enough money to move into a better apartment, and in her note, she thanked Taylor for giving her a place to feel safe, for reminding her that kindness still existed in the world. Taylor sat on the steps of the restaurant, staring at the letter for a long time. Keanu had been right. A single act of kindness could change everything. And it didn't stop with her. It rippled outward, touching lives in ways she never could have imagined. The next morning, as she prepped for the day, she heard the sound of a motorcycle pulling up outside. Keanu stepped inside, hands in his pockets, looking around at the bustling kitchen. "Got a minute?" he asked. Taylor wiped her hands on a towel and nodded. Keanu pulled a set of keys from his pocket and set them on the counter. She stared at them, confused. "What's this?" He smirked. "An old friend of mine owns a space downtown. Bigger kitchen, more tables. I think it might be time for you to take Casa DeLuna to the next level." Taylor's heart pounded. "You're serious?" Keanu nodded. "Completely. You've built something incredible here, but I think you're ready for more." Taylor's hands trembled as she picked up the keys. She had spent so long fighting just to survive, just to keep a roof over their heads. And now, she was being given an opportunity to dream bigger. Luna peeked over her mother's shoulder, her eyes shining. "Mama, can I draw a sign for the new place?" Taylor laughed, pulling her daughter into a hug. "Of course you can, baby." Keanu grinned. "Then it's settled." The move wasn't easy, but with the help of the community, they made it happen. Within weeks, Casa DeLuna reopened in a larger space, with more room for laughter, more space for dreams to grow. The first night in the new location, Taylor stood behind the counter watching as customers filled every seat, as Ava bustled around taking orders, as Luna proudly handed out menus. And in the corner, sitting at his usual table, Keanu gave her a nod. She walked over and placed a plate in front of him. "You're really bad at letting me thank you," she teased. He chuckled. "That's because you don't have to." She sat across from him, exhaling slowly. "You know, I used to think my life was just about getting through each day. I never thought I'd have something like this." Keanu's expression softened. "You made it happen, Taylor. I just gave you a little push." She smiled, glancing around the restaurant. "I'm gonna keep paying it forward, just like you did." Keanu lifted his glass in a silent toast. "That's all I could ask for." The night stretched on, filled with the sounds of clinking glasses, warm laughter, and the kind of joy that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. And Taylor knew, deep in her heart, that this was just the beginning. As the weeks passed in the new location, Casa DeLuna flourished beyond anything Taylor had imagined. What had once been a small dream, barely held together by hope and perseverance, had now become a pillar of the community. The restaurant wasn't just a place to eat. It was a place where people gathered, where stories were shared over warm meals, where those who had once struggled found solace in knowing they weren't alone. One afternoon, as Taylor was kneading dough in the back kitchen, Ava rushed in with a newspaper clutched in her hands. "You need to see this," she said breathlessly, thrusting the paper forward. Taylor wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron before taking it. The headline made her heart skip a beat. From gas station worker to restaurateur, the woman behind Clearview's most beloved eatery. Her eyes scanned the article, her breath catching as she read the words. The journalist had captured everything. The struggles, the late nights, the moment Keanu Reeves had stepped into her life, and how that small act of kindness had ignited a fire within her to build something lasting. The piece wasn't just about her journey, it was about resilience, about community, about the way kindness could ripple outward and change lives. Taylor exhaled, overwhelmed. "I don't even know what to say." Ava grinned. "How about, I think, we need more tables because this place is about to get packed." Sure enough, by the evening, a new wave of customers flooded in. Some were locals eager to celebrate Taylor's success, while others had read the article and driven in from neighboring towns just to experience the food that had been described as home on a plate. Taylor barely had a moment to breathe as she moved between the kitchen and the dining area, making sure everything was perfect. At one point, she caught sight of Keanu, standing near the entrance, watching the bustling restaurant with quiet satisfaction. She made her way over to him, arms crossed. "You knew about this, didn't you?" He gave her an innocent look. "I might have put in a good word." She shook her head with a laugh. "You really don't stop, do you?" Keanu's gaze softened. "Not when it comes to the people who deserve it." Taylor looked around at the restaurant, at Luna handing out menus with a proud smile, at Ava laughing as she took orders, at the faces of customers who had found comfort in the space she had created. She took a deep breath. "This isn't just a restaurant anymore." Keanu nodded. "No, it's a legacy." And as the night continued, as the restaurant filled with the sounds of joy and warmth, Taylor knew, without a doubt, that he was right. Her story wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about creating something that would outlive the struggles, something that would continue to grow, to inspire, to remind people that even in the darkest of moments, kindness could change everything. And she had no intention of stopping now. Thanks for watching. There's another incredible video waiting for you. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.